A pleasant day to our professor, Doc Russell Jim Tamayo, and to my fellow classmates. Today I am going to talk about organizational culture. So let's have first the definition of organizational culture. According to Edgar Shin, it is the set of values, norms, guiding beliefs, and understandings that is shared by members of an organization and is taught to new members. Another definition, according to Shin's organizational culture model, it is a pattern of shared basic assumptions that was learned by a group as it solved problems of external adaptation and internal integration that has worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. So if we are going to simply put it, organizational culture is the DNA of a business or an organization. On the work of Gill and Kennedy, 1982, organizational culture is seen as being central to organizational success rather than factors such as structure, strategy, or politics. As a result, the attention shifted away from national cultures and focused more on organizational culture. Interest in organizational culture from the human resource management and performance point of views stems from the fact that organizational culture was perceived to be offering a non-mechanistic, flexible, and imaginative approach to understanding how organization work. This is according to Brown, 1998. Consequently, organizational culture is considered to be the cure of the most organizational problems. And this is according to Wilson of 1992. Now I'm going to present to you the two culture gurus when it comes to organizational culture. And this is Charles Handy and Edgar Shin. So they are the most popular proponent of organizational culture. So why is it very important that we talk about this thing? So culture can provide a competitive advantage. Culture also can attract talent. Culture tells people what's encouraged and acceptable and what's not acceptable and not encouraged. It is also an effective or toxic culture can lead to disengaged people, high turnover, bad customer service, and ultimately low profits. Now, let's have the levels of organizational culture. You have it in here, the artifacts, the values, and the underlying assumptions. Now, culture can be analyzed at different levels or several different levels. With the term level, it means the degree to which the cultural phenomenon is visible to the observer. Some of the confusion surrounding the definition of what culture really is resulting from not differentiating the levels at which it manifests itself. These levels range from the very tangible overt manifestations that one can see and feel to the deeply embedded, unconscious, and basic assumptions that Edgar Shin defines as the essence of culture. In between these layers are various espoused beliefs, values, norms, and rules of behavior that members of the culture use as a way of depicting the culture to themselves and to others. Now we talk about these artifacts. At the surface is the level of artifacts, which includes all the phenomena that one sees, hears, and feels when one encounters a new group with an unfamiliar culture. Artifacts include the visible products of the group, such as the architecture of its physical environment, its language, its technology and products, its artistic creations, its style. as embodied in clothing, manners of address, or emotional displays and myths and stories told about the organization, its published list of values, its observable rituals and ceremonies, and so on. The climate of the group is an artifact of the deeper cultural levels, as is visible behavior of its members. Artifacts also include, for purposes of cultural analysis, the organizational processes by which such behavior is made routine, and structural elements such as charters, formal descriptions of how the organization works, and organization charts. The most important point to be made about this level of the culture is that it is both easy to observe and very difficult to decipher. The Egyptians and the Mayans both built highly visible pyramids, but the meaning of pyramids in each culture was very different. Tombs in one, temples as well as tombs in the other. In other words, observers can describe what they see and feel, but cannot reconstruct from that alone what those things mean in the given group, or whether they even reflect important underlying assumptions. On the other hand, one school of thought argues that one's own response to physical artifacts such as buildings and office layouts can lead to the identification of major images and root metaphors that reflect the deepest level of the culture. And this is according to Gagliardi of 1990. This kind of immediate insights would be especially relevant if the organization one is experiencing is in the same larger culture as the researcher. The problem is that symbols are ambiguous, and one can only test one's insights into what something may mean if one has also experienced the culture at the deeper levels of values and assumptions. So we go to these particular values. All group learning ultimately reflects someone's original beliefs and values, their sense of what ought to be as distinct from what it is. When a group is first created or when it faces a new task, issue, or problem, the first solution proposed to deal with it reflects some individual's own assumptions about what is right or what is wrong, what will work or what will not work. Those individuals who prevail, who can influence the group to adopt a certain approach to the problem, will later be identified as leaders or founders. But the group does not yet have any shared knowledge as a group because it has not yet taken a common action in reference to whatever it is supposed to do. Whatever is proposed will only be perceived as what the leader wants until the group has taken some joint action and together observe the outcome of that action. There is not as yet a shared basis for determining whether what the leader wants will turn out to be valid. For example, in a young business, if sales begin to decline, a manager may say, we must increase advertising because of her belief that advertising always increases sales. The group, never having experienced this situation before, will hear that assertion as a statement of the manager's belief and values. She believes that when one is in trouble, it is a good thing to increase advertising. What the leader initially proposes, therefore, cannot have any status other than a value to be questioned, debated, challenged, and tested. If the manager convinces the group to act on her belief, and if the solution works, and if the group has a shared perception of that success, then the perceived value that advertising is good gradually becomes transformed, first into a shared value or belief, and ultimately into a shared assumption. If actions based on it continue to be successful, if this transformation process occurs, group members will tend to forget that originally they were not sure and that the proposed course of action was at an earlier time just a proposal to be debated and confronted. Now we go to the underlying consumption assumptions. When a solution to a problem works repeatedly, it comes to be taken for granted. What was once a hypothesis supported only by a hunch or a value gradually comes to be treated as a reality. We come to believe that nature really works this way. Basic assumptions in this sense are different from what some anthropologists call dominant value orientations, in that such dominant orientations reflect the preferred solution among several basic alternatives, but all the alternatives are still visible in the culture, and any given member of the culture could, from time to time, behave according to the variant as well as the dominant orientation. This is according to Stradbeck of 1961. Basic assumptions, in the sense in which I want to define that concept, have become so taken for granted that one finds little variation within a social units. This degree of consensus results from repeated success in implementing certain beliefs and values, as previously described. In fact, if a basic assumption comes to be strongly held in a group, members will find behavior based on any other premise inconceivable. For example, a group whose basic assumption is that the individual's rights supersede those of the group members would find it inconceivable that members would commit suicide or in some other way sacrifice themselves to the group, even if they had dishonored the group. In capitalist country, it is inconceivable that one might design a company to operate consistently at a financial loss, or that it does not matter whether or not a product works. In an occupation, in an occupation such as engineering, it would be inconceivable to deliberately design something that is unsafe. It is taken for granted assumptions that things should be safe. Basic assumptions, in this sense, are similar to what Arrakis has identified as theories in use. The implicit assumptions that actually guide behavior, that tell group members how to perceive, think about, and feel about things. This is according to Sean of 1974. Now, I'll just give you this particular visual, the four layers of organizational culture. And I am also going to share to you this particular visual. Shin's four layers. Okay. And now we go to the four types of organizational culture. So have you heard people refer to their coworkers as their family? That's an indication that they are working in a clan culture, also called a collaborate culture, where there's a lot of emphasis placed on teamwork and togetherness. So the clan culture offer a very friendly working environment where things like relationships, morale, participation, and consensus take center stage. In terms of leadership, managers are looked to as mentors rather than figureheads who dish out instructions and reprimands. Now we go to the second type of organizational culture, which is adhocracy. Rooted in the word ad hoc, this type of culture lives by that move fast and break things philosophy that's been popular among a lot of startups. You might also hear it referred to as the create culture. Keane and Cameron explained that this type of culture fosters a very entrepreneurial type of work environment where employees are encouraged to take a risk and aggressively pursue off the wall ideas. As a result, a lot of innovation, learning, and growth takes place for employees and organizations as a whole. The third one is what we call the markets. A market culture is also called a compete culture because the emphasis is placed on results. To put it simply, people want to win and accomplish what they set out to do. Employees are highly goal focused and leaders are tough and demanding in order to achieve the success metrics the company has defined. It can be a high pressure environment, but simultaneously rewarding when that hard work pays off with real, measurable results. And the last one is what we call the hierarchy. A hierarchy culture, known as a control culture, applies to work environments that are more structured and process oriented. Most activities and decisions are dictated by existing procedures rather than a lot of innovation and free thinking. Leaders are in place to ensure that their teams run like well-oiled machines and they place the bulk of their focus on stability, results, and reliable delivery. Now I'm going to share to you a particular video.
What are the 4 types of organizational culture? And why is it important to know what those 4 types are? And how can those 4 types of culture help inform some decision making that will help you advance your organization? Now, first, let's say there's clearly more than just 4 types of organizational culture, but they can be boiled down to these 4 simplified models so that you can identify which culture most resonates with you, which one will help you drive your strategic plans most effectively, and also allow you to find organizations that fit with your type. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand what the 4 types of cultures are, but you'll know which one works for you, and it may not be the one that you thought. In addition, you'll understand why it matters and why understanding organizational culture is the key to driving business results. First, let's start with the definition of culture. Culture is the experiences that we have which shape our beliefs. Those beliefs determine the actions that we take, and those actions get us results. So culture drives results. Culture is the way that you get results in any organization. And so the type of culture that you have will determine whether or not you get results. And how does that get determined? It gets determined in whether or not you are aligned with your strategic plan. The different kinds of strategies that you have will require different kinds of cultures. It's important to note here that I don't have a favorite culture. I don't have a culture that I think you should implement. That's something that only you can decide as a business leader based on the strategic goals that you have. But understanding the 4 key categories of culture will allow you to understand the types of cultural beliefs that you need to nurture to achieve results. Research shows that there are 4 key types of culture, and those are clan-oriented cultures, adhocracy-oriented cultures, market-oriented cultures, and hierarchy-oriented cultures. Now, I have worked in 2 of those kinds of cultures, and I know which one I liked the most, but that's not what's important here. What's important is whether or not that culture matched the strategic goals that the organization had. So let's start by defining each of those cultures and why it matters. The first is the clan-oriented culture. Now, this is often seen in small or family-owned businesses. Clan-oriented cultures often feel much like a family. That might be the kind of culture where you hear people talking about, it feels like a family here. People are incredibly close and they form a sort of clan. That clan takes precedence over many of the other factors that might drive culture in another organization. In those cultures, there's a big focus on doing things together, on nurturing upcoming talent, and also on mentorship. The leaders take new hires under their wing and make sure that they integrate into the organization organization at an emotional and social level beyond all else, because it's the clan that is the most important. There are also large organizations who have a clan-oriented culture. Just because an organization is large doesn't mean that there aren't many little subcultures within that organization, and that's where the clans are found. The second kind of culture is an adhocracy-oriented model. And adhocracies are ones that value innovation and risk-taking and people taking ownership of the work that they're doing, even giving them more ability to make decisions than the average organization. Self-management is one of the keys to success in adhocracy. What that means is that there is less emphasis on hierarchy and management and top-down decision-making, and much more empowerment of employees who perhaps don't have a formal job title of manager. People are given the incentive to take risks and to innovate, and that innovation and risk-taking is rewarded. It means that they're able to get to market more quickly than other organizations because they're doing things with agility and speed. It also means that there's less structure and hierarchy in that organization than, say, for example, a market-oriented culture. Market-oriented cultures are focused on getting results above all else. They are deeply competitive. They are constantly looking at the competition, and one of their key results is always market share. Do we have maximum market share? They want to do better than their competition, and they thrive under that pressure. Market-oriented cultures are focused on getting the job done. Achieving results is the number one most important thing in a market-oriented culture. And finally, the fourth type of culture is the hierarchy-oriented culture. That is an organization that is strictly controlled, that process and procedure is deeply ingrained in the organization's decision-making. Those organizations, often viewed as bureaucratic, but really they value doing things right. Stability is incredibly important, as is efficiency. The military, for example, is a hierarchy-oriented organization. Now, the truth is, no matter which of these four cultures you have, the tools to transform and intentionally craft culture remain the same across the board. And we're going to talk about what those tools are in just a moment. But I want to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe to this channel and like this video if you're interested in workplace culture. So what are the tools to help transform and intentionally create the culture that works for you? One of those tools is to identify clearly the kind of culture that you have. What that means is sometimes a new hire doesn't know if it's a market-oriented culture or a hierarchy-oriented culture. Explaining that explicitly, saying that to a new employee so that they understand what they're getting into, and better yet, saying it to a candidate who's considering working with your organization is the best way to ensure alignment between the kind of environment an employee wants to work in and the kind of environment that this organization is. So that requires defining your cultural beliefs. Your cultural beliefs are the ways in which you want your employees to show up. It's the beliefs that you think the organization should hold overall that will drive the actions that everyone takes so that they are more adhocracy-oriented or market-oriented, for example. Explicitly identifying those cultural beliefs that are most important to advance your culture will allow employees to understand the kind of behaviors that they need to take. You do that by reinforcing positive experiences with recognition and storytelling, and adjusting negative experiences with feedback. You can also give positive feedback to employees who are nurturing the right cultural beliefs. So let's say you're a startup. You have historically had clan-oriented culture. You've been small and scrappy, and you've worked with a series of people who were there in the beginning, and you've achieved a certain level of results that has been excellent for the organization to a point. But now you're starting to get successful, and it's time to up-level to the next evolution of this organization's culture. The clan-oriented culture might no longer be working for you. In fact, people in organizations that are similar to this example have noticed perhaps that the clan-oriented culture for a startup that's really starting to grow can be a detriment to the culture, because what ends up happening is that there are different factions of clans that aren't perhaps aligned. The people who were there in the beginning, who remember what it used to be like, don't have the same mindset as the people who are new to the organization, who see a fast-growing startup that's ready to become a real world-class organization. I've worked in an organization like that, and what I noticed is there was literally a term for the OGs, we called them, and the newbies. And the OGs and the newbies did not get along. It was because there was a culture clash. The newbies felt like they were joining an adhocracy-oriented culture, but the OGs were clinging to the clan-oriented culture that they remembered from years before. So getting clear on your ideal culture is critical. And if you're not sure what kind of culture you have, then one exercise is to ask your employees. Have feedback exchanges where you're not only reinforcing the behavior that you want to see, but you're asking your employees for feedback about the organization. Ask them what's working for them and what's not working, and what you can do to help create more clarity. Many organizations run surveys where they ask their employees what they think it is. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I mentioned earlier that there are subcultures within companies. I'll give you an example. I used to work at a large Fortune 100 technology company, and that organization was a market-oriented culture. We were competitive, we wanted to grow fast, and we were focused on getting results. And the organization did get many results. But I worked within the HR team, and the HR team, when we did our own culture assessment, felt much more like an adhocracy-oriented culture. Now, that's not a problem. It's okay to have different types of cultures at different levels of the organization. But the exercise of getting clear about what kind of culture we were nurturing was critical in giving effective feedback, telling stories that resonated with employees, and giving recognition that was appropriate. So feedback, storytelling, and recognition are three key tools that you can use to reinforce and develop the kind of culture that you're trying to create. The key here is that every piece of feedback that you give, every story that you tell, and every recognition that you do is tied to the cultural belief that you want to nurture and the key results that you're trying to achieve.
So now let's go to Handy's 4 classes of culture: the power, role, task, and the person. So in the power culture, so this is the power concentration at the top, and it is a very important, it's like spider at the center of the webs, and it fosters decision making. It's attractive for people who are power oriented and can become autocratic. We also have the role culture, specialized areas coordinated by senior management, specific roles and responsibilities, can be illustrated as a building supported by pillars, and having the right person for the right job, and rewarding for people who value job security. Now we go to what we call the task culture. So individuals come together to form teams. Teams have decision-making powers for task completion. We also have best represented as a net and allocation of projects to people. We also have scarce resources can lead to particular issues. Now, the last one is what we call the person culture. Exists only to serve and assist individuals within the organization, illustrated by constellation of stars, no corporate objectives and no targets, an extremely high degree of autonomy. Now I'm going to share another video lecture.
Laura back here again with Business Academy Online for another models video, and this time we're looking at my favourite cultural model, Handy's cultural types. Charles Handy is an Irish philosopher who specialises in areas of organisational behaviour and management, and this is his most famous model, the cultural types. Handy argued that organisations fit into 4 major cultures: power, role, task and person. And it's really important to understand the different cultures of our own organisations, but also those of our suppliers, because, for example, some of these cultures don't work well together. We need to understand our suppliers' culture to know whether they're going to be compatible with us. If their role culture's all about rules and we're all about the outcome and the task, then there may be a clash and a conflict. We want those that are compatible. So let's look at the power culture first. Power culture is usually with a central figure of power. They're like the spider in the web. They hold all of the power and all decisions go through them. There's few rules, it's not bureaucratic, and it's fast moving. It tends to work in small businesses or family-owned businesses who keep controlling that central area of power. Next, role culture. Role culture is very bureaucratic. It's got a huge hierarchy and it's known as machine because everyone's a cog in the wheel. It's very much unresponsive to change, so there's slow decision making, work is formalised and standardised, and everyone plays their part. This is the public sector, like local government and NHS. Task culture. Task culture is totally focused on the job or the project. And what it does is it utilises the full capabilities of teams. Smaller teams, fast decision makings, and the decisions are based on those technical expertise of the staff. It's all about the outcome or the output, and that's your Googles, your Apples, your Amazon, the fast moving, outcome focused organisations. Person culture. Person culture are structures which exist with the interests of the individuals at heart. The whole business is surrounded by that individual. With high levels of expertise, they tend to band together because it makes sense to do so. So you see this with doctors in doctors' surgeries and barristers in their chambers. It's a very flat structure because everybody is at the same level and they're all managing that together. So it's all about the individual for this one.
So let's go to the functions of organizational culture. Let's have the first function, which provides a sense of identity. Organizational culture conveys a sense of identity for the organization members. Many are function as a fun place to work that values employee satisfaction and customer loyalty over corporate profits. And number two, we have generates collective commitments. Organizational culture facilitates the generation of commitments. So an organization's mission, which is larger than one's individual self-interest. When there is a strong overarching culture, people feel that they are part of that larger, well-defined pool. Firms with good cultures may be committed to the highest quality of customer service. The third one, reinforces values and behaviors. Organizational culture clarifies and reinforces standards of behavior. It guides employees with words and deeds. Thus, it is especially useful to newcomers. In this sense, organizational culture provides stability to behavior. It also reinforces the values in the organization. It helps employees understand why the organization does what it does and how it intends to accomplish long-term goals. The number 4 function is to promote a social system stability. Organizational culture enhances the stability of the social system. Social system stability reflects the extent to which the work environment is perceived as positive and reinforcing, and the extent to which conflict and change are effectively managed. And number 5, it gives members a clear vision. An organizational culture gives its members a clear vision of the organization's vision as well as mission. It also presents a consistent image to its markets, customers, and clients. Over time, this image can give an organization a competitive advantage by building commitment to its products or services. Number 6 function defines rewards and sanctions. Organizational culture defines the rewards and sanctions that managers can use Rules develop about how good performance will be rewarded and about what sanctions will be levied for poor performance. And organizational cultures differ in the way they use reward systems. Now let's have the number 7 function, integrate subsystems and processes. The integration lets the organization coordinate its various actions effectively. Common language develops within a culture and it helps in communication. And number 8 defines boundaries of group. Organizational culture defines the boundaries of the group and the criteria for inclusion in the group. Well-defined group boundaries enhance members' identification with the group and the group's work. Strong group support help members get their work done. And number 9 defines rules for power and relations. Organizational cultures define rules for power, rules for social stratification, and the ways in which social status is determined. Some accord social status and power to people of high achievements. Others base status and power on seniority. The nature and quality of peer relationships and interpersonal interactions are also defined by the organization's culture. And number 10, it develops an ideology. The last organizational culture function is the development and communication of an ideology that defines what the organization is all about. An ideology is a set of overarching values that collect all the basic assumptions embedded in the organization's culture. An ideology is a guide to action. It is communicated to newcomers. Number 11, it serves as a control mechanism. So organizational culture also serves as a control mechanism for shaping behavior. Norms that guide behavior are a part of the culture. So I'm going to, so those are the functions of organizational culture. I'm going to share this particular quotation coming from Edgar Shin. A key link between leadership and culture, he says, the only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture. So thank you for listening to me. These are my resources or references. Have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.